There is a place beneath the sand where time forgets to move. Saqqara, the ancient necropolis of kings and priests, lies in stillness, its stairways descending not merely into earth, but into memory itself. Beneath crumbling corridors and sealed chambers, there rests a single block of limestone unlike any other, veined with strange perfection, its face etched with stars that no longer belong to the sky above us. It is said the block was uncovered only once, centuries ago, by workmen repairing a shaft. They saw the carvings, strange and unfamiliar, like constellations mirrored from another world. The markings did not match the patterns of Egypt's known heavens, not Orion, not Sirius, not the faithful dog star that guided the Nile's rise. These were older, softer, as though they belonged to skies that once looked down upon a different earth. And when they touched the surface, the air grew thick, as if the stone itself exhaled after a silence of 10,000 years. In those dim chambers, the priests of Saqqara once moved like shadows between worlds. They carried oil lamps that trembled in the dark, light bending across the polished faces of limestone blocks so perfectly aligned they seemed to hum. The builders were not common laborers. They were initiates, readers of stars, listeners of stone. They believed that form itself was sacred, that geometry was the handwriting of the divine. Every angle was prayer, every cut an echo of the heavens. They spoke of the resonance of creation, a hidden rhythm beneath matter. The stone was not merely shaped but tuned, as though its veins could catch the vibrations of the universe. When the priests chanted, sound gathered in the corridors, folding upon itself until the air trembled with invisible motion. Perhaps they believed the world itself began this way, not in fire, but in sound, a note sustained in the infinite chamber of the cosmos. Modern scholars call it myth, yet fragments of evidence still linger like dust that refuses to settle. The Great Step Pyramid of Djoser, older than the pyramids of Giza, shows precision beyond what primitive copper tools could explain. Beneath it, the tunnels twist for miles, some cut with such accuracy that their corners form perfect right angles, untouched by the centuries. In one passage, explorers have reported walls that seem to amplify a whisper, carrying it down corridors as if the stone were alive, remembering voices long gone. Was the block beneath Saqqara a relic of some ancient experiment? A celestial tablet, a map not of stars as they are, but as they were? The carvings suggest motion. Spirals, arcs, intersecting lines that seem to trace cycles of precession, epochs where stars shifted their thrones. If true, it would mean the builders knew the heavens not as observers, but as participants, aligning their world to the breath of eternity. In that chamber, where torches once flickered and incense smoked against painted ceilings, we can still imagine the moment of awakening. The head priest, his voice low as desert wind, stands before the stone, tracing the patterns with his hand. Around him, silence swells, the silence of meaning too vast for words. He knows the carvings are not decoration. They are conversation, between heaven and earth, between human breath and the pulse of stars. And perhaps, for a moment, the stone answered. It might have been a vibration too faint for the senses, a tremor that passed through the fingertips into the soul, a tone that resonated within the chest, drawing the body into harmony with something ancient, vast, and unseen. The builders called it the memory of creation, the moment when matter remembered where it came from. When night falls over Saqqara now, no sound stirs, only wind through broken pillars and the faint cry of the desert owl. Yet under the dunes, that silent chamber remains. The carvings still gleam faintly when light touches them, as though each groove stores the last shimmer of a vanished sun. For when the sand sighs and the moon drifts low, the desert whispers softly, not of death, but of rest, and of a city that still dreams beneath its golden veil, breathing in silence. There is a room within the Great Pyramid where sound refuses to die. Step inside, and even a breath lingers, a faint echo folding over itself, circling until it vanishes into stillness. The walls do not merely reflect. They listen. They receive every tone as if each were sacred. And those who have stood in the king's chamber speak of feeling watched, not by eyes, but by presence. as though the air itself remembers. This chamber, sealed beneath millions of tons of stone, is carved from rose granite hauled from Aswan, nearly 600 miles away. Each block fitted with a precision that defies decay. There is no paint, no inscription, no sign of worship, only silence that hums. Engineers call it resonance. Mystics call it memory. The difference, perhaps, is faith. When light enters through the narrow passage, it falls not upon ornament, but upon proportion. The chamber's length, width, and height form a harmonic ratio, 2:1, square root 5, the same pattern found in the structure of shells, seeds, and galaxies. To the ancients, this was not coincidence but conversation. They believed that harmony was the language of the gods, that by aligning with it, one might hear creation itself breathe. Some nights, when the air in Giza stills, explorers have reported tones within the pyramid, deep, faint, almost human. Scientists blame shifting stone, the expansion of air. But the sound carries rhythm, as if the monument itself keeps time with the turning of the heavens. Long before the word pyramid was spoken, the priests of Heliopolis called this form Perneter, house of the divine energy. They said each pyramid was a tuning fork for the stars, its shafts aligned not merely for air, but for starlight. The northern passage pointed toward Thuban, the pole star of that age. The southern, toward Orion, the celestial gate of rebirth. When light entered these narrow conduits, it did not illuminate, it harmonized. Some believe the block marks a point of power, a place where the Earth's magnetic field once converged. Others whisper it is older than Egypt itself, a fragment of a civilization erased by flood and fire, whose monuments taught the first dynasties how to reach toward the divine. But such theories dissolve in the same silence that fills the tomb. For the stone does not explain. It only waits. Imagine the ritual. A procession of priests moves through the outer corridors, their footsteps absorbed by stone. Incense coils upward like pale smoke seeking sky. In the king's chamber, a solitary figure kneels beside the granite sarcophagus, an empty box that never held a body. He places a small bronze bowl upon its edge and begins to chant a single tone. The note trembles, the air thickens, and the chamber joins him. The walls do not echo, they sing. The sound builds, folding into itself, rising into harmonics beyond the range of speech. The bowl begins to vibrate, a visible tremor. Dust lifts from the floor and hangs suspended in midair, as if gravity has loosened its grip. For a moment, the priest feels both within and beyond his body. He is not praying to the heavens. He is resonating with them. Modern experiments reveal that the king's chamber amplifies frequencies around 117 Hz, a tone known to induce calm, even altered states of consciousness. Those who meditate there often describe a sensation of weightlessness, a hum that travels through bone and blood like memory. Some claim to hear whispers in that vibration, not voices, but syllables of energy, shaped by the geometry itself. Whether by design or divine accident, the chamber seems built not for the dead, but for awakening. Its silence is not absence. It is invitation, a space where matter and meaning blur, where a human breath might align with the rhythm of stars. Above, through stone and shadow, the night sky turns. The constellations that guided the builders still drift in their slow procession, ancient and unchanged. Perhaps the granite still catches their echo, the subtle tremor of starlight that falls through the universe like sound. And beneath, within the still heart of the pyramid, the chamber continues to listen. And so we listen, not with ears, but with the stillness between heartbeats. We feel the air around us thick with unspoken intention. The constellations above shift slowly, ancient guardians watching the sands bury and unbury their secrets. It listens to time, to footsteps, to dust settling on dust. It listens to silence and translates it into presence. Some say the ancients built monuments to endure forever, but perhaps endurance was never the goal. Perhaps they sought not to preserve memory, but to teach silence how to sing. And even now, as night folds over Giza, that song endures, a hum below hearing, A pulse beneath sleep, the quiet voice of the chamber that still hears the stars. They are not remembered by name, yet their work endures beyond imagination. Beneath the sands of Egypt, across deserts and mountains, through ruins and echoes, their fingerprints remain, carved not into stone, but into the silence between stones. They were the unseen ones, the architects of the invisible, the builders who believed that matter itself could be persuaded to speak if only it were placed with reverence. Their art was not of decoration but of listening. They listened to air as it moved between walls, to shadow as it fell across an arch, to the hum beneath the earth that vibrated through their bones. Every structure they raised was a translation, a gesture through which the unseen might take form. In the stillness of their craft, the sacred became measurable, and geometry became prayer. It is said they were not many, a small brotherhood of master builders who served kings yet answered only to the laws of harmony. They studied the flight of birds, the rhythm of tides, the way the stars leaned against one another. They understood that all things, from the curve of a palm leaf to the tilt of Orion, moved in the same pattern of breath. What they sought was not glory but resonance, a design so perfect that heaven and earth would meet in its proportions. Perhaps the stone remembers more than stars. Perhaps it remembers us, the wanderers who keep returning to touch what time tried to forget. In ancient texts, there are veiled references to those who drew with sound. The phrase appears in fragments, a hymn here, a temple carving there, suggesting a people who shaped stone not through force, but through frequency. Some believed they used tones to soften granite, to move colossal blocks as easily as clay. Others thought the phrase was metaphorical, that their true construction was not physical but spiritual, that they built sanctuaries within consciousness itself. Their greatest achievement may not have been the pyramids or temples that still defy time, but the understanding that harmony is itself divine. When they built for silence. When they measured light. The spaces they created were designed to contain presence, to allow energy, sound, and thought to stand still long enough to be felt. Even now, when one walks through the ruins of their craft, something invisible stirs. The air feels structured. The emptiness feels deliberate. Legends say their tools were simple, copper chisels, wooden plumb lines, cords dusted with ochre. But among their implements, there was one object never found, the stone that sings. According to old accounts, it was a small oval carved from black diorite that could hum when held against other stones. Some say it was lost. Others say it was buried intentionally, hidden from an age that would use it for power rather than prayer. The architects were not men of faith as we understand it. Their devotion was not to gods, but to balance. They taught that when a wall stands in proportion to the cosmos, it becomes a mirror. Through it, one can see the pattern behind all things, the lattice of breath, vibration, and light from which existence flows. To them, creation was not a miracle but a discipline, a practice of arranging the invisible until it reveals itself. Perhaps this is why no burial sites for them have ever been found. It was said that when their work was complete, they returned to frequency, dissolving into the same harmony they had spent their lives studying. The temples they built were not tombs but gateways, instruments tuned to eternity. Today, when archaeologists restore the ruins of their genius, they often speak of precision beyond understanding. They measure angles and weights, they analyze materials and techniques, yet none of these explain the feeling that lingers in such places. To stand within their architecture is to feel included in something vast, as if the air itself has memory, as if one's heartbeat aligns with something larger. They left behind no statues, no inscriptions claiming authorship, no signatures in stone. They were content to vanish, trusting the geometry to speak for them. And perhaps it still does, in the symmetry of a broken arch, in the perfect alignment of a chamber, in the whisper that hums within stone halls when night deepens. The invisible, they taught, is not absence. It is simply that which has not yet taken form. And so, through patience and proportion, they gave shape to what the eye could not see. Theirs was the art of transformation, of turning silence into song, and shadow into measure. When the desert wind moves across the ruins of their temples, it seems to hum in their language still. a vibration both mournful and serene, the echo of hands that built not for empire but for eternity. Perhaps the true monument they left us is not made of stone at all, but of awareness, the quiet recognition that beneath every surface, something unseen continues to build. At the edge of the desert, where wind moves like breath across broken lintels, lies a temple whose stones do not mark devotion but duration. Abydos, city of Osiris, keeper of cycles, still holds the scent of incense in its cracks. Its columns lean inward as if listening to something ancient, something still unfolding. Scholars speak of it as a memorial, yet the priests who once tended its silence called it a clock for the soul, Perjet, the house that measures forever. Some truths do not wish to be told. They wish only to be felt, in the quiet between breaths, in the tremor of distant memory. Each dawn the temple woke before the sun. In the great hypostyle hall, shafts of amber light slipped through narrow slits, touching the same carvings at the same hour year after year. When a ray struck the hieroglyph of the god's eye, drums sounded softly, not to summon people, but to tell the world it had aligned again. Time, for them, was not a line but a circle, a breathing wheel of return. The temple did not keep time. It became time. Its architects carved numbers into form. The distance between pillars equaled the measure of a lunar month. The span of the central nave matched the path of the solstice. Even the height of the ceiling whispered the ratio of the earth to the heavens. To walk through its corridors was to move through a living calendar. Every step a count, every shadow an hour. At the heart of it stood a sanctuary with no window, where darkness itself was allowed to exist untouched, representing the unmeasured eternity beyond all reckoning. During the festival of the rising, priests carried bowls of Nile water through the halls, pouring them at each threshold. The water caught the morning light and trembled like liquid gold. Ripples reflected onto the reliefs, making the gods appear to breathe. It was said that whoever watched the reflections long enough would see the boundary between day and night dissolve. In that trembling shimmer, they believed, eternity revealed its rhythm, the still point that turns all cycles. Modern archaeologists call it precision engineering. The priests called it memory. Every year, when the shadow of the western pylon met the first column at midsummer, chants rose that had been sung for centuries without change. They were not prayers for favor but acknowledgments of pattern, gratitude for repetition. To them, immortality was not escape from time, but perfect participation within it. When one stands there now, among fallen capitals and cracked pavement, the same alignment persists. At certain hours the light slides along the floor exactly as it did 4,000 years ago. Dust drifts through the beam like slow stars. You can almost hear the murmur of sandals, the faint ring of copper cymbals. Nothing in this place rushes. It is as if time has agreed to walk at the pace of stone. Legends tell of a chamber beneath the sanctuary, a hidden room where scribes recorded the ages. They carved not events but intervals, the breath between flood and drought, the silence between eclipses. They believed that to measure was to bless, that by naming each moment they allowed it to live again. Some claim those tablets still sleep under the temple floor, sealed in salt, counting quietly in the dark. As night falls, Abydos glows pale under starlight. The outlines of its walls merge with horizon and sky, and for a heartbeat one cannot tell where earth ends or heaven begins. Perhaps that was always its purpose, not to dominate eternity, but to mirror it. In its symmetry, one sees the humility of builders who knew that nothing endures except the pattern itself. To measure eternity, they built something that could change yet remain true. The wind moves through the columns now, speaking in a tongue of dust. It says the same thing the priests once whispered, that each dawn repeats creation, that each breath renews the world, and that to stand still within the rhythm is to touch the edge of forever. And so the temple endures, not because its stones resist decay, but because its design continues to measure what never ends, the quiet unfolding of eternity itself. On the eastern face of the plateau, where wind combs the limestone like a patient hand, there is a single block whose surface carries a pattern unlike the rest. A shallow undulation, a frozen wave, as if water once pressed its palm into stone and left a memory behind. Visitors pass it without a glance, intent on grand lines and blinding light. Yet the old guardians point quietly and say, "Here the builders signed without names." The mark is not inscription, not ornament, but resonance made visible. A seal that seems to hum when the sun warms it, a subtle language carved in breath. Some call it erosion, the slow script of weather. Others, reading with the eyes of craft, call it intention, the evidence of a method that guided force without wounding the grain. The hidden engineers did not court spectacle. They worked where shadow gathers, in quarries at Tura, in ramps of packed clay and crushed limestone, in corridors left deliberately narrow so sound could be measured by ear. Their tools were simple in appearance. Copper chisels hardened by work, dolerite pounding stones, sledges, cords snapped with red ochre to fix a line. Yet the result was a fit so precise that blade and whisper find no purchase between courses. Along the bases, leveling courses lie like horizons, quiet rules set beneath the visible. Casing stones once clad the Great Pyramid with a skin of white, polished Tura limestone that answered light as if it were water. A few remain at the foot of the monument, angles intact, faces still smooth as sleep. In their polish, one hears the patience of hands trained to follow a geometry that was less command than listening. And somewhere beneath Saqqara's dreaming sands, the stone still breathes, waiting for night to fall again, so it may once more remember the sky. Far above, in the relieving chambers over the king's chamber, there are red marks, quarry scripts and alignment lines painted in ochre, names of crews and a cartouche that anchors the work to a rein. Scholars see logistics. Artisans see conversation. Measurements, reminders, small breaths of intention left where only stone would attend them. These traces are not boast. They are compass. To the builders, the truest authorship was the join, the proportion, the silence that holds. And then there is the wave on that unassuming block. At midday it lies muted, soft as a memory half remembered. At dawn and dusk, it wakes. A gentle ripple of light and shade, crest and trough sliding under the hand like the skin of a sleeping creature. Engineers propose a story of bedding planes and differential wear. The desert proposes another, older tale. That vibration itself can draw a pattern out of matter, and that the pattern remains when the music is gone. In quarries, one still hears rumors of singing stone. Nummulitic limestone that answers a tap with a note, shells of ancient seas packed into the cliff, each a tiny ear. The seal, some say, is the picture of that tone, a signature left by harmony. Nothing in this landscape shouts. Even the largest blocks keep their voices low. Stand close, and the plateau speaks in small accuracies. A course that runs true for 100 cubits. A corner that refuses to wander. A shaft that knows the star it once welcomed. The hidden engineers trusted these unglamorous fidelities. They tuned base to sky by way of level, plumb, square, a trinity austere and devotional. When a surface was right, they knew not by triumph but by quiet, the way a bowl becomes still when water finds its rest. There is, too, the matter of transport, the old question that beats like a drum in the modern mind. The truth the desert whispers is gentler than miracle and more demanding than myth. Sledges on wetted sand, teams moving as one breath, routes planned like starlight, pauses taken at intervals that match the body's endurance and the day's heat. Sometimes the simplest path is the most invisible, hiding in the open, forgotten because it asks for no astonishment. The seal on the block reminds us. Their mastery was not thunder, but cadence. When the wind rises from the north, one can almost hear a low tone along the face of the monument, a hush that might be sand or might be the voice of voids and joints in sympathy. In the king's chamber, a held note climbs into harmonics. Outside, a shadowed wave records the memory of motion. Inside and out, sound leaves its ghost. Perhaps the seal is nothing more than weather remembering water. Perhaps it is the record of a tool guided with uncommon mercy. Perhaps it is both nature and hand sharing authorship, as they so often do when craft learns to follow the grain. At sunset, the wave darkens into a single soft band. A palm laid upon it meets warmth gathered through the day and a coolness nested beneath. A thin threshold where heat and stone trade breath. In that small gradient, one understands what the hidden engineers sought. Not dominion but agreement. Stone that carries weight without strain. Surfaces that invite light without glare. Spaces that hold silence without emptiness. A seal that says only this: we listened. The night comes quickly on the plateau. The wind loosens its long, even thread. Stars rise in the old positions, patient and exact. The wave dissolves into shadow, and the block becomes ordinary again, part of the vast humility of the base. Yet those who have seen it carry away a quiet certainty that the greatest signatures are the ones that do not insist. The seal remains not to declare authorship, but to offer a lesson in attention. And in that lesson, the hidden engineers return, as they always do, not in name but in pattern, breathing through the stone they taught to remember. In the hollow heart of the pyramid, where darkness gathers like velvet, legends speak of a light that once shone without fire. It was not torchlight, nor oil, nor sunbeam caught by mirror, but a steady glow, golden, motionless, alive. The Greeks called it the lamp of eternity, the Arabs Nur al-Azal, the light before creation. They said it burned for centuries, untouched by time or air, and when the conquerors came, they found only silence, as if the flame had withdrawn itself rather than be seen by eyes unready. Such tales may seem born of wonder, yet inscriptions across Egypt echo their mystery. In temples of Dendera and Edfu, the walls show strange carvings, elongated bulbs held by priests, snakes of light stretching from their tips. To some, they depict myth, the birth of divine energy. To others, they hint at a memory, a craft once known, when light was coaxed from resonance, not combustion. The ancients spoke of the living fire as both power and presence. It was not meant to illuminate rooms, but to awaken them. A temple, they said, was alive only when its inner chamber was filled with breath made visible, light that did not burn. The priests guarded this art as sacred balance. Too bright, and the body fails. Too dim, and the spirit forgets. They believed flame and consciousness were one, that to hold a pure light was to remember the origin of the soul. There are places in Egypt where the air itself seems to remember. There were rituals for summoning it. The high priest would enter before dawn, barefoot, holding a bowl of crystal and a rod of copper. He would trace a spiral in the air, murmuring the names of the sun's hidden faces. In that spiral, light was said to condense, not summoned from without, but released from within. When the bowl began to glow, the room warmed, yet the air remained still. The flame did not flicker, for it fed on vibration, not breath. It required no fuel, for its source was harmony. Modern scholars, reading these accounts, call them symbols of divine knowledge, allegories for enlightenment. But deep within the Serapeum at Saqqara, a few fragments of polished crystal have been found, their surfaces fused as if by heat. Yet no soot, no smoke, no residue marks the walls around them. The chambers remain clean, almost antiseptic, as though touched by a light that left no trace. Coincidence, perhaps, or echo. To the Egyptians, light was more than vision. It was being. The hieroglyph for to exist was the same as that for to shine. They did not separate illumination from life, and so, their flame that never burned may have been less a tool and more a teaching, that what is most alive gives without consuming, shines without destruction. In that still, unhurried glow, they saw the soul's reflection, calm, eternal, without smoke or shadow. There are later stories, whispered among the desert's keepers, of explorers who entered forbidden chambers and found faint radiance seeping from cracks in the stone. Not bright enough to see, but enough to feel, a warmth against the eyes. Those who lingered claimed to hear tones in the air, low and harmonic, as if the pyramid were singing softly to itself. One man wrote that he felt watched, not with menace but compassion, as though the walls remembered him from before his birth. Perhaps the flame was never meant to endure in the physical world. Perhaps it was extinguished the moment humanity forgot how to see what does not burn. Some say it still exists, hidden in the balance between vibration and silence, waiting for minds quiet enough to perceive it again. Tonight, when darkness falls and the last fires are put out, imagine that light. It has no source and no hunger. It rests within the air, within the heart, within every breath that does not ask to be seen. Perhaps this was the true secret of the pyramid's glow, that it never sought to conquer night, only to remind it that they were kin. If you listen closely, you may hear it still, a faint hum behind the quiet, a warmth that has no flame. For what burns can be extinguished, but what remembers light will never fade. And in that endless remembering, the temple remains lit. Beneath the restless sprawl of modern Cairo, older layers of the world still sleep. There are streets that no longer lead anywhere, tunnels bricked shut long before the city had a name, and stories whispered by those who dig too deep. Tales of a map carved in stone, a design that stretched beyond Egypt itself, linking temples, pyramids, and forgotten monuments into a pattern that could only be seen from heaven. The priests called it the path of the hidden sun, a geometry of power meant not to control but to remember. According to fragments found on broken stele, the map was not a chart of land or water, but of alignment. Each site marked a note in a celestial harmony. Giza, Heliopolis, Abydos, Luxor, forming a chord that echoed the stars' procession. To the ancients, this was not superstition. It was continuity. The earth was the reflection of the sky, and the duty of the builder was to keep both in tune. If one star dimmed, one stone must be realigned. If one temple fell, the music faltered. The map, then, was not for travelers. It was for guardians. It is said that the map itself was kept in a chamber beneath the Temple of the Sun, a slab of obsidian engraved with lines so fine they vanished when touched by light. Only under torch smoke, when darkness softened the glow, could its pattern be seen, a lattice of energy running like veins through the earth. The priests used it to trace the breath of the planet, to know where to build, where to pray, where the voice of creation spoke most clearly. Deep beneath the Giza Plateau, where corridors stretch like veins beneath the desert, there are passages said to breathe, stone chambers that inhale at dusk and exhale at dawn. But such knowledge, once drawn, casts its own shadow. There were whispers that the map revealed more than lines of harmony, that it pointed to hollows where the earth was not asleep but waiting. Some feared these were gates, thresholds best left unopened. So, when empires rose and fell, the keepers sealed the chamber and swore silence. They buried the slab beneath veils of stone and sand, aligning new temples above it to mask its pulse. Over time, memory turned to legend, and the legend became rumor. That under Cairo's foundation, something still hums, a map too alive to die. In the 1920s, during subway excavations, workers unearthed a polished fragment of black stone etched with intersecting arcs. Engineers dismissed it as decoration. Archaeologists stored it and forgot. But a few who handled it said it felt warm, as if lit from within. One man claimed to hear a faint ringing when he closed his eyes. He called it the echo of direction. The fragment vanished before it could be studied. Some say it was taken to Europe, others that it was quietly returned to the sand. To imagine the full map is to imagine intention on a planetary scale. The Nile as a vertical axis, the desert temples as nodes of resonance, the Red Sea and Sinai as living circuits. When viewed as myth, it becomes poetry. When viewed as precision, it becomes unsettling. For if the alignments are true, then someone long before history knew how to draw energy from the turning of the world. Perhaps the map was not literal. Perhaps it described the inner terrain, the geography of consciousness mirrored in the outer earth. The priests often said, "As above, so within." To follow the map may not have meant to walk it, but to awaken it, to trace with thought what the ancients traced with stone. Each temple, each star, each human spirit, a coordinate on the same design. When the last light leaves the city and the desert takes back its silence, Cairo becomes shadow again, a shimmer of ancient breath beneath modern noise. The wind slides through alleys that once were processional paths, and the moon touches minarets that echo the angle of obelisks long gone. Somewhere below, beneath layers of concrete and dust, the invisible lines still converge. The map may never be seen again, but its pulse endures, not on stone, but in rhythm, in repetition, in the quiet alignment between stars and souls. The ancients taught that every civilization leaves behind two maps, one of earth, one of meaning. The first fades. The second waits to be remembered. And perhaps, when we walk beneath the moon, feeling that strange pull toward what cannot be named, we are not lost at all. We are simply following the map that leads into shadow. At the far end of the pyramid's lowest corridor lies a door that no one has ever opened. It is not carved, but grown, fitted so precisely into the surrounding stone that its edges vanish into shadow. The explorers who found it more than a century ago tried to measure, to tap, to pierce. They heard a hollow beyond, felt a faint current of cooler air, but the stone refused all entry. And so it remains, the last unopened silence of Egypt. To stand before it is to feel the weight of unspoken time. Dust drifts like slow snow through the narrow passage, each grain reflecting the beam of a trembling lantern. The air is close yet alive. Somewhere deep in the wall, the earth hums. Not a sound one hears, but one the bones accept. The door, they say, is not a barrier but a listening surface. It waits, patient, tuned to a frequency that no longer finds us. The priests of old never wrote of it directly. In their hymns there are only hints, verses about thresholds where gods paused to breathe, where sound became light and light became rest. The texts speak of the room of still breath, where the builders placed not treasure, but awareness. To open it, one line reads, is to end the circle. And so they sealed it, leaving the passage untouched, an unfinished heartbeat beneath the pyramid's skin. Scholars call it a false door, an architectural illusion, meant for the soul of the dead to pass through. But those who have spent nights inside the monument say otherwise. At certain hours, they claim, the stone seems to expand, the air thins, and a low resonance fills the corridor. A pulse too steady to be wind. Instruments fail to record it, though the body feels it clearly. The silence deepens until it becomes pressure, like standing in the presence of something vast and compassionate. The old chroniclers called them the lungs of the earth. Perhaps the priests designed it as a tuning chamber, a place where sound would slow and fold upon itself, echoing into infinity. Or perhaps it was never meant for human sense at all. The ancients spoke of doors that led not outward, but inward, thresholds within consciousness. The sealed chamber, then, might not contain anything. It might be the teaching, that some mysteries exist only to remind us that not all things must be known. Imagine for a moment that the door did open. Behind it, perhaps, would not be a room, but a continuation of silence. Deeper, rounder, endless. A space where weight dissolves and thought no longer echoes. The kind of quiet that does not merely lack sound, but exceeds it. The silence that was here before breath and will remain after memory. Those who have stood before that sealed stone describe a strange peace, as if the body recognizes something the mind has forgotten. The darkness is not threatening. It is maternal, immense. It holds the same calm one finds in the pause before dawn, or in the final exhale of prayer. To be near it is to feel the boundary between self and time soften. Perhaps that is the real reason the door was never opened. The builders, wise in the language of proportion, may have known that every monument must contain a silence, a space untouched, so that the divine has somewhere to dwell. Without that hollow, all becomes noise. Without that closed chamber, even eternity would fray. The pyramid, then, is not a tomb but a meditation. A vast body of stone wrapped around a single held breath. At night, when the desert cools and the stars tremble above the plateau, the wind slips through the broken passages like a sigh. It brushes against the sealed door, and for an instant, the stone seems to listen again. No one knows if it hears the voice of the world or its own. Perhaps they are the same. The lantern fades, the dust settles, the corridor breathes, and behind that perfect symmetry of stone, the silence remains, patient, ancient, waiting for nothing, needing nothing, complete. Some doors are not meant to open. They are meant to teach us how to listen. When the last torch fades in the desert wind, the earth exhales. The dunes stretch their bodies into shadow, the pyramids lose their edges, and the stars reclaim their patient dominion. Everything returns to the rhythm that existed before sound, the slow pulse beneath stone, the heartbeat that built the world grain by grain. The ancients called this hour the second silence, the time when even the gods closed their eyes so the earth could dream. Some say that in this quiet, the stones remember. The chambers of the pyramids hum with the breath of centuries, each vibration a syllable of an unspoken language. If one could listen deeply enough, past the hum of the wind, past the echo of footfalls, past one's own thoughts, one might hear the architecture of memory itself. Every wall, every pillar, every fragment of dust is a recording of what once passed here. The chant of the builder, the sigh of the priest, the footstep of a king who no longer needed a name. To the ancient priests, these hidden corridors were not mere architecture but living instruments, built to align with the invisible rhythm of the world. In the beginning, they built not to rise above time, but to rest within it. They believed eternity was not a place, but a posture, the stillness between breaths. Their temples were not houses of worship, but instruments tuned to the frequency of stars. When night covered the Nile and the people withdrew to sleep, the stones continued their slow conversation with heaven. Light entered through shafts invisible to the eye, starlight bending across centuries to touch the granite with a whisper. In those moments, the earth was awake within its sleep. Now the sands have shifted, the cities have changed, the languages that named the gods have dissolved into wind. Yet the silence remains. It moves through the ruins like an invisible tide, smoothing what time has broken, patient as the moon's return. The same rhythm that once guided the builders still pulses beneath our feet. It is the rhythm of rest, of return, of remembering without grief. When the earth sleeps, it does not forget. It gathers. It folds every story back into itself. The laughter of markets long gone, the prayers whispered into cracks of stone, the cries of those who loved and were lost. All of it sinks into the deep breath of soil, waiting to rise again when light allows. To sleep, in the oldest tongue, meant not to vanish but to prepare for remembrance. And perhaps that is what the ancients meant by immortality. Not an endless heartbeat, but a rhythm that repeats through all things. The same vibration in the wings of a moth, in the turning of galaxies, in the faint tremor of a candle's flame before it goes out. When we sleep, we join that rhythm again, returning to the architecture of silence that built us. Imagine, for a moment, walking alone across the plateau. The air is cool, and the sand carries a fragrance older than rain. The stars are so bright they seem near enough to breathe. Beneath your feet, unseen, the chambers wait, not as tombs, but as lungs. Each one holds a pocket of air that has not been disturbed for thousands of years. That air is still pure, still listening. If you could kneel and press your ear to the ground, perhaps you would hear it, the echo of all who ever dared to wonder. There is a kind of holiness in what remains unspoken. The builders understood this. That is why they sealed one chamber forever, why they left their final room closed, not to hide, but to protect the sacred quiet. They knew that every story needs a silence at its end, a still point where sound can find its reflection. Without that stillness, even truth would crumble. And so the earth sleeps. It sleeps not from weariness, but from devotion. It rests so that the pattern may hold, so that light may return with purpose. Every dawn that rises over the plateau is a resurrection, not of gods or kings, but of the listening itself. For even as we dream, the earth is awake within us, rearranging its dust, balancing its breath, building once more from silence outward. Perhaps that is why the ancients built their monuments for sleep. Not for the dead, but for the living who needed to remember how to rest in wonder. Their stones were lullabies, their hieroglyphs songs of return. When the wind passes through the broken corridors of their temples, it does not mourn. It hums the same tune the builders once followed, the song that says, "All things are circle, all endings are beginnings, all silence is alive." Now, as you listen to the story's end, let the images fade, the torches, the hieroglyphs, the long corridors, and the patient door. Let them drift like dust through starlight. The night has already begun its gentle work. Beyond your walls, the earth is breathing, slow, ancient, forgiving. You are part of that breath. They believed that every block of limestone held a fragment of the earth's pulse. and when shaped in sacred proportion, that pulse could speak. The pyramids sleep, and so does the sea, and so will you. The rhythm is the same. Inhale, remember. Exhale, release. Between the two, eternity hums softly, waiting. And in that hum, older than stone, younger than dawn, the earth dreams again. The entrances were sealed long ago. Inside, silence reigns. Yet explorers who have ventured near these depths report an uncanny sense of movement in the air, as if some great creature sleeps beneath the ground. A faint, rhythmic draft passes through the cracks, as though the pyramid itself is alive, exhaling its ancient breath. The priests of old spoke softly of this force. They called it Karank, the breath of renewal, a current that binds life and death, spirit and stone. At sunset, they gathered with torches near the subterranean shafts, whispering hymns to awaken the deep air. Some said they heard low tones echo through the walls, not voices, but vibrations, like a deep heartbeat made of air and silence. In those moments, the pyramid became more than monument. It was an organism, drawing in wind, exhaling energy, harmonizing the desert's stillness with the stars' cold fire. The priests taught that when the earth breathes, time breathes with it. Each inhalation was creation, each exhalation, rest. Modern engineers who have measured the pressure within the sealed chambers found slight fluctuations between night and dawn, a mystery attributed to changes in temperature, though the numbers do not align neatly. Even today, when the desert wind falls quiet, some travelers claim they can hear the sigh of those buried halls, soft as a memory that refuses to fade. Perhaps it is the echo of air trapped since the first builders walked these sands. Or perhaps it is something deeper, a pulse that predates the world of men, still whispering in frequencies too ancient to measure. In the heart of one such chamber lies a shaft leading nowhere, perfectly cut, its purpose lost. Some believe it was designed to release the breath of the earth itself, a sacred ventilation through which the planet spoke to the heavens. Others say it was symbolic, a passage not for air, but for spirit, for the unseen to move between realms. The truth, like the wind, cannot be caught. It can only be felt, against the skin, across the quiet surface of stone, in the pause between one heartbeat and the next. When night settles over Giza, and the stars burn above like eyes of forgotten gods, the dunes grow still. Beneath them, air moves in secret paths, slow and deliberate. It travels through shafts and hollows, through temples of silence and corridors of dust, breathing the same rhythm it has kept since the dawn of stone. And in that rhythm, one can almost hear the intention of those who built it, the prayer of geometry, the devotion of craft, the belief that even stone must breathe, that within the stillest of things, there lies a living pulse. Perhaps that is why the pyramids endure, not because they were built to defy time, but because they were built to breathe it. At the edge of dawn, a pale band of silver opens above the desert, and the old city of Heliopolis, Unu, the pillar, seems to rise from breath alone. Columns, broken but unyielding, keep their vigil over the quiet fields where the Nile once mirrored the sky. Here, the priests greeted first light with a stillness so complete it felt like water holding its shape. And at the heart of their rite stood a single idea, older than any king. That light is a voice, and stone can learn its language. They spoke of the Benben, the seed of first creation, a sacred stone whose sloping sides returned the sun to itself. Echoes of that form endure in the pyramids and the slender obelisks that once pierced the morning, each crowned with a tiny pyramidion sheathed. Some say, in electrum, so the first rays would catch and sing. One by one, as the horizon brightened, those patient needles awakened, not with flame, but with a quiet gleam that felt like thought. The rite began in a hush. A scribe set a copper mirror on a low altar, half-shadowed, half-expectant. An acolyte poured water into a shallow basin, the surface smoothing into a sheet of soft starlight. A high priest traced a circle in the dust with a reed and whispered the names of hours, not to command them, but to remind them where to stand. The desert cooled toward stillness. Birds made a single note and then fell silent again, as if the air itself held up a finger for calm. When the sun edged over the world, it did not arrive all at once. It unfolded like silk. Light touched the tip of a pyramid ion and slid down its faces in thin bands, the way a blessing moves. On the altar's mirror, a pale coin appeared, trembled, and steadied. In the water basin, the glow deepened until the bowl became a sketch of the horizon, a second dawn cupped in human hands. And for a breath-length moment, the court of Heliopolis looked both outward and inward, sky gazing into sky. The priests believed the sun was not only fire but order, a ceremony the cosmos performs for itself. They watched the heliacal rising of Sirius to begin the year, traced the long procession of equinox shadows across their court, and arranged stone so that light would find it on appointed days. This was not spectacle. It was conversation. The obelisk was a syllable, the pyramid ion, a soft consonant on which light could rest. Geometry was a prayer spoken with angles. Some have wondered whether polished limestone and golden sheathing did more than glitter. They imagine lenses hidden in tall courtyards, corridors narrowed to guide a ray, reflected across a sequence of surfaces until it arrived, quiet, obedient, at a sacred relief, a name, a sealed chamber. Others picture no apparatus at all, only a human face leaning into dawn, eyes half closed, learning how the world says yes. In the shade of a colonnade, the scribe read a hymn. The sun is a traveler returning from the oceanic dark. The sun is a child waking from the night. The sun is a letter opened anew each morning. The words were less instruction than remembering. When the hymn ended, the circle drawn in dust held the first sharp shadow of the day, a black petal laid upon the earth. The priest stepped into it, aligning heel and heart, and breathed as if accepting an unseen weight. Modern visitors note how light behaves here, even among ruins. At certain seasons, a shard of brightness will thread a doorway you would not expect, cross a broken lintel, and pause on the remnant of a carved sign like a fingertip finding a pulse. Scholars write of alignments and calendars, of the electrum-capped point that must have flashed like a star even at noon. Engineers speak of angles and polish and reflectivity, and each account is a kind of reverence, each number a bow. Yet the old silence remains. It gathers at dawn as it did when Heliopolis was whole, when the court smelled of juniper and cool stone, when a small bell sounded once and then dissolved into listening. The light lays itself upon the world, and the world remembers how to receive it. Even now, as fragments of pillars lean like elders and the wind writes its slow script in dust, one can feel that other ceremony continuing. The sun bends, the stone answers, the air agrees. In the imagination of the faithful, light was not only seen, it was felt as a gentle pressure upon the eyelids, a warmth moving inward to the bones, a soft instruction to become simple. They did not seek to trap the sun or coax it into flame. They learned its patience. They built surfaces the way one builds trust, plane by plane, angle by angle, until what moved across them could move within them too. By midday, the gleam softens, and the obelisk becomes once more a plain column of shadow and stone. The basin's water grows ordinary, a clear circle with a dusty rim. The mirror dims to its copper self. But the ceremony does not truly end. It descends to a thinner register, a pulse held below speech. Somewhere inside the day, a memory continues to glow, not of brilliance, but of arrangement, modest and exact. Perhaps this is all the technology there ever was. The discipline to place a surface where a ray will land, to open a chamber at the hour a beam will arrive, to stand still enough that a moving thing can use you as a rest. Perhaps the ancients learned that bending light begins with bending time, slowing the heart, quieting the mind, until the sun's soft grammar can be heard. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some light only bends in silence. There was a time when the Nile did not simply flow, it sang. Not with music, but with resonance, a low pulse that seemed to join the heart of the river with the heart of the world. The ancients believed that water was the first instrument, that every current carried the memory of the voice that once called creation into being. And in Egypt, that voice became a rhythm soft, circular, eternal. Each year, as the flood rose from the south, The priests of Heliopolis and Memphis would listen. They said the Nile carried messages from the unseen, patterns in the current, harmonies in the surge. On the nights before the inundation, they placed hollow vessels in the water, shaped to amplify sound. At dawn, they leaned close and swore they could hear tones. Not random, but measured, as though the river was breathing in music. To them, the Nile was not a river but an artery of divine vibration. The temples along its banks were not built at random. Each stood where the current's voice changed pitch, where the water's energy met stone in harmony. The great complexes of Karnak and Luxor, it is said, rose precisely where the earth hummed in its own key. They called it Ma'at Enkaith, the balance of sound within stone. Each wall, each column was carved to echo. The hymns sung at dawn would return from the granite not as repetition, but as completion, the note fulfilled, the silence embraced. When the priests stood in those courts and chanted, the resonance merged with the pulse beneath their feet. The building itself became an instrument, the Nile, the breath that played it. Modern researchers have found that the chambers of Dendra, Abydos, and Saqqara all possess strange acoustic qualities, tones that linger, reverberations that make air vibrate long after sound has stopped. When certain frequencies are sung, the walls seem to come alive. Ancient basins carved into temple floors still resonate when water fills them, humming faintly as if remembering their part in some forgotten symphony. Some scholars think this was coincidence, the byproduct of design. But to the ancient mind, there was no such thing as accident. Everything that echoed was alive. Everything that resonated was aware. At night, when the priests left the sanctuaries and the stars shone upon the dark mirror of the river, they said the Nile changed its song. The tone became slower, deeper, almost mournful, as though the water itself missed the voices that once joined it. The sound of insects, the sigh of reeds, the faint lap against the banks all merged into a single breath. And in that hush, the whole land seemed to vibrate, temples, dunes, even air. The priests would close their eyes and feel the frequency move through them, not as noise, but as alignment. They believed that to live in harmony with creation, one must be tuned like an instrument, neither too loud nor too still, vibrating in the exact tone of the earth's breath. In the tomb of an unknown scribe near Abydos, there lies a fragment of verse carved in ochre. He who hears the water, hears himself. No one knows what melody he heard that night, only that he carved it in haste, as if fearing the silence might erase it. Today the Nile moves more quietly, its floods tamed, its music lost to machines and measurement. But when wind crosses its surface at dusk, something stirs. A tremor between the ripples, a faint hum beneath the noise. Perhaps it is only the wind. Or perhaps, beneath the layers of centuries, the river still remembers its ancient song. A pulse that spoke once to stone, and still, in secret frequencies, speaks to us. There are whispers of a city that once stood where no city should. Buried deep beneath the desert west of Memphis, its outline appears only when the wind grows tired. Faint ridges beneath dunes, shapes that vanish when the sun shifts. The Bedouin call it Al-Medina al-Na'ima, the city that sleeps. Scholars, when they speak of it at all, call it myth. But the sands have their own memory, and sometimes, when the night is still enough, they breathe it back. It is said the city was built long before Egypt was Egypt, before kings, before temples, when the desert was a green plain and the sky carried 2 moons. Its builders were wanderers who followed the stars, carrying with them stones that sang when struck. They did not build walls but circles, vast rings of limestone aligned with constellations now forgotten. Each ring held a courtyard, and in its center, a single column that pointed to the heart of the heavens. When the sun rose, the stones glowed as if lit from within. Some said they stored light during the night, releasing it slowly, like breath. Others believed it was the desert itself remembering the dawn. Travelers wrote of seeing these ruins shimmer at the edge of their vision, too precise to be natural, too silent to be real. Then, one season, the wind changed. The dunes moved as though commanded, swallowing the city grain by grain. No battle, no fire, no sound. only the slow erasure of time's will. When the storm passed, nothing remained but the faintest ridges beneath the sand, a geometry erased by patience. Archaeologists who have mapped the region by satellite speak of anomalous symmetry, beneath the dunes, lines and curves too deliberate for nature's hand. Yet when they dig, the desert offers only silence. Instruments fail, compasses tremble, and at night the sand hums with static, as if refusing to release what it holds. Ancient texts hint at its name, Parisu, the House of Silence. Some connect it to Thoth, the scribe of the gods, who was said to have hidden his first library beneath the western sands, where no mortal could disturb the sacred order of memory. Others whisper it was a place where dreams were gathered, where seers lay upon carved stones and entered sleep to speak with the unseen. The legend says the city did not die, it merely turned inward. People learned to dwell in dream rather than matter. Their temples became thoughts, their streets became sound, and their light retreated beneath the skin of the world. In that vision, the city is not gone. It waits, patient, within the desert's breath, dreaming of form. Sometimes, during mirages, shapes rise from the horizon, domes and corridors rippling in the heat. Travelers swear they hear faint bells, or the sound of footsteps just beneath the sand. One account from the 19th century tells of a French explorer who vanished after claiming he saw columns shining like glass, yet made of dust. His journal ends with a final line. It sleeps, and in its sleep it remembers. Perhaps the city was never physical. Perhaps it was a reflection, an echo of human longing, carved into the silence by those who once looked at the stars and mistook light for direction. Or perhaps, beneath layers of centuries, the sand still shelters its heart, intact and breathing slowly, like a creature between dreams. At night, when the desert cools, the dunes settle into perfect stillness. The air loses its voice, and the horizon becomes a bowl of faint starlight. In that silence, one can almost sense the presence of streets, the outline of houses, the murmur of sleep within invisible walls. The city may never rise again. It may be content to dream, to remain halfway between memory and myth, unseen yet unforgotten. But those who have walked across its shadow know this. Not all ruins are meant to be uncovered. Some are meant to be heard in sleep, to be touched only by imagination.